ladies and gentlemen. All right, get this on, so I'll shut that off so you can hear me better. Good morning. I hope you're all doing well today. Today's date is September 11th, 2021. I am your host, Tom Kaczynski. Welcome to the show this morning. And I want to say it's good to be back with you all. For those of you who didn't understand what was happening there for a minute, I was in the penalty box for something. I'm not really sure what, but it was something. And now I'm out. And that will occasion some changes in show format going forward, because in order to have the conversations we need to have, and we need to be having them, I am going to have to do things quite a bit differently in the future. So what I am thinking is, and this probably won't happen till next month for reasons that are largely technical, is that I am going to come on here at a certain time every morning. Let's just say, actually, you guys will tell me, would you rather me do a show at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m.? Either of those two options work. 9 would be too late. I think 7's actually good, but you guys tell me. We'll talk about it. And I'll come on YouTube at like 6:45 or 15 minutes beforehand. I'll do a 10-minute kind of preview, wind up, quick thought, let you know what's happening. And then we're going to shift the second half over to Telegram. And the reason why isn't because I necessarily would prefer to do it that way, but it's more that I have learned that I'm just not going to be able to talk about anything. I to this day, I still don't know why. Every time I've been shut down, I've been shut down. But I know that you're not allowed to talk medicine on here. That's fine. So we're not going to do that. But there's a lot of medical stuff that needs to be talked about on a regular basis. And I've really only touched the tip of the iceberg. So the new format, I think, and you tell me if you guys like this. We'll try to do 30 minutes a few times a week, maybe 3, maybe more. We'll see. I'll be able to have some interaction with you guys. Maybe we'll do some occasional evening shows since it's a voice chat, or I can do it as a video chat where you can ask questions directly. I think that'll be awesome. It'll be good. And it won't be on a platform that can be canceled because, let's be honest, the censorship is going to get rocketed up to a 10 here pretty quickly because of current events. You all know what's happening. You don't need me to tell you. But we'll get into that in a minute. What I wanted to say as preface that, so we'll do that. I'll come on. I'll probably do an article every day or a piece of news that I think you need to hear that maybe you're not hearing. Maybe a deep dive, might be daily news, might be a new tech coming out. Very interested in talking about the 5 bads: big government, big tech, big pharma, big media, and big banking. And coming into that, I mean, the amount of studying I've been doing about the history of the foundation of the Bank of England, actually. Good morning, Alan. Good to see you. And yeah, there's some. If things don't fall apart, there's gonna be some really interesting writing in my future. I don't know if we'll get to that point, but what I'll do is I'll do a little monologue like you guys are used to hearing. I will do a story and just some other quick hits. And if there's things I want to do in more depth, that'll probably give you 30 minutes to get your day, reset it, and we'll close it with a prayer, of course. I mean, this is a spiritual war. I know a lot of people don't understand that yet, but you need to. Otherwise, it won't make sense. And this idea you can draw lines between A and B, it just doesn't work. So that's coming down the line. Number of you have asked how Dana and I are doing. Life continues to be exciting up in the woods here. We let's see, switch your. Oh, is it not coming in right? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's weird. All right, give me a second here. No, it won't let me. I'm sorry. Yeah, it won't let me switch it right now. So that's a problem. All right, let me do it differently. I'll come back. Give me a second. I'll just. Oh no, I got it. Okay, good. Apologies. Give me a second. This is not as easy to do. Great. You guys can tell I'm not the most technologically. All right, we'll just do it this way. That's fine. Is that better? I didn't know it was coming up sideways. When you do it on the phone, I'm just going to tell you, when you do it on the phone, what it says should happen is that you're supposed to have, it's supposed to show sideways, but the fact that it isn't is kind of interesting. So that's fine. I can adjust to this. It's not a big deal. So hopefully that's better. Thank you. You know what? I tell you a funny story about the beard, Alan, just as a little aside. But yeah, no, the beard looks good from this angle, see? But if you look like straight on, it doesn't look quite as impressive. But yeah, no, I've been growing the beard intentionally. Every nerve cell you have, and hairs have a nerve cell, actually is capable of storing memory. So, you read those old biblical stories about, what is it, Samson and the Philistines, and you wonder, really, if there is something as an older man when you get your hair, there's awareness with it. So I don't don't think my wife is ready to let me grow the full Santa Claus, but yeah, it certainly is looking like the times, isn't it? Although I will shave this off and do all those sorts of things at some point. The problem is, as some of you know, things have been a little crazy over here. I still am living off a generator, to be honest with you, which it is a really long story there, and that's why I haven't been able to do a lot of the stuff I wanted to do as quickly. But events are overtaking us all, and the fact that I'm living off my preps actually has not been a terrible thing, because I think a lot of people are going to be in that boat before long. I mean, we're fine. We're safe. It's just, it's a weird, quirky story where, learning to live with things you were used to live with without is very challenging. And we will eventually, God willing, have this all taken care of. It's more of a problem of just not having the right people, not so much the resources. I mean, although resources help, and if you ever want to help the show, the Venmo's at CVCPRV. So that's fine. All right. So to the show points. What I wanted to talk about today, and I'm not really doing a good job of organizing this, but I want you to know, and I'll do a better show on this later, but for the people who are here, is we are in World War III. And I want to explain how World War III is different than World War II, because I think people have missed the context just a little bit, and I think it makes a lot of sense of a lot of different things for people who don't necessarily see it. So if World War II was the question of how certain groups of people would prove their inherent superiority over others, and that they were beginning to use technology and industry to try to accomplish those means, which you could say the Germans were doing in their own way through, genetic purity, or the Japanese through experimentation, or even the Russians through ideology, or this idea, we thought capital would do it. World War III is the inverse of World War II. World War III is the revenge of the elites. They decided they are going to win this game not by uplifting themselves over the rest of humanity, although I think they do eventually intend to do that with technology, but basically to degrade the rest of us. And World War III, in that context, began a very long time ago. Think of all the chemical degradation of our environment, our food supply, people who've done a very good job, and things that got lost because in the left-right paradigm, you're not allowed to be aware of ecology and things that are healthy for you on the right-wing side, and the left-wing side can't touch morality unless it says, certain people bad, because they're infested with Marxists. But more deeply than that, we have now come to the point in the game where they've decided whatever they can do to tear down the system so we all destroy each other is the victory, and whatever they can inject into the conversation, we'll say it that way, to make people less capable of individual ability, of being able to work with one another, they would do that. And this is true because you see the global bits and pieces. Like, I'll give you an example. Just a simple one. At the same time Biden came out with his sort of ridiculous policies, the governments of France, the Netherlands, I think it's Germany, and Denmark all said they will not allow people who have not, received the injections to travel into those countries. And you see that the governments of certain countries are working very quickly in concert to box out their citizens, rather. And if you look at France, if you've been following anything over there, and I have, what you would see very quickly is that there have been huge protests, huge riots, and all these things, and yet the governments are acting in a way that runs contrary to that. So there's a story there, or if you look at Australia and the sad situation down there, what you see is an effort to unmake the people. They are destroying their own economies, and who knows, it may get worse. I was having a conversation about this specific point about, how do you push back against a system that's wrecking itself? Well, maybe you just need to wreck the system faster, and I actually had an idea about how it could happen that I want to plant as a seed in some people's minds. Maybe someone who has some influence will listen to this. The Mid-October, the United States is going to run out of money. I think a lot of people know this. The debt ceiling is about to be breached. Janet Yellen, who's the Secretary of the Treasury, former Fed chair, said that, well, if you don't allow us to print more money, more fake money, which will inflate the currency, which will make things cost more and make you poorer, then we are going to have the U.S. dollar collapse with all sorts of things. And to be very clear, a U.S. dollar collapse is a pretty terrible scenario for a lot of people. However, it's also one way to shove a giant, how should you say, crowbar in the machinery of this machine that's going after so many people. That is saying that you can't work. That said yesterday that 80 to 100 million Americans would be mandated out of their ability to work, and it's criminalizing and depersonalizing them because our patience is growing thin. How you think the people who are looking at this election, the way they are feel, especially when you look at that, there was that canvas that was done in Maricopa County where they found that there were votes that were just lost, people who said they had voted, tens of thousands in their vote. And look, I'm not here to make it all about the politics, but what I'm saying is the people in charge of the system are willing to do whatever they need to do to destroy us. And if we don't find a way to stop that system from functioning, they will probably succeed. And how that happens is not a question for any one man, woman, or country, frankly, at this point to answer. It's a question where people, through mass action, have to pick points in the system at which they will offer resistance. Will that be trucker strikes? Will that be non-compliance? I was reading a rumor that said only 30% of the people have actually gone ahead and gone with this, but that they constantly inflate and lie about the numbers because they want greater compliance. And that's why, the carrots having failed, they're bringing out the sticks. But if you're going to offer that sort of resistance, how do you do it? And you can't do it online because everything will get disrupted. You can plant ideas and you can do things. And I'm not here to advocate anything violent either. I do think that's likely coming. I should say that. And, I wrote The Coming Civil War. You guys know that. Most of you have read it. And it's a different battle that's coming, but what they are functionally doing is creating a situation where people can't work. And I will tell you this. I'll tell you what I'm very worried about. So they've been creating this pseudo rally in Washington. I believe it's next Saturday, called Justice for J6, and it's supposed to be this idea for the people who were locked up on January 6th for that demonstration, that they're going to say they want them to be released or something. And here's what's funny. First off, no one who's right of center, people who are right of center use long titles. I'll just tell you, it's just the truth of it, okay? For reasons that are sort of interesting. Justice for J6 is kind of it's a setup title, but it's the perfect sort of false flaggy thing that's being set up in advance, or I should say directly after 9/11. So it's not on the Taliban and all that, because they want to draw attention away from that debacle of what happened in Afghanistan. And it's set up in a way where what we're seeing is that a week later, they're building the structures back in the Capitol. They're putting the fences, to keep us out in the districts, right? And now it's the perfect opportunity for them to take some crazy zealots and try to, create a situation where something bad can happen. We saw this, by the way. Charlottesville, if you don't understand this, was the precursor for this. And in fact, when they tried to do a second Charlottesville in D.C., people elected not to show up, specifically because they knew that what was originally supposed to be something standing against the destruction of our history, Confederate monuments, which, by the way, Richmond pulled down their Lee statue, as the effort continues to remake history, because you have to destroy the evidence, right? If you commit a crime, you destroy the evidence. You are having the crime of having your culture and history erased. So what they do when they get rid of these things and they rework the language is they're destroying the evidence. And they silence the dissidents. That's why I'm sitting here as this, crazy professor, looking like I stepped out of, Jebediah's barn, which is actually closer to the truth than not. And by the way, if you're watching the show, hit the like button if you can. It actually helps get a little bit of traction. People are going to need to hear these sorts of things going forward. All right, so let's continue. So what I was saying is that a means of offering some sort of resistance is out there, and I've had a number of conversations with people during this week. I haven't been lazy, and basically, there's an understanding that the government is not the driver of this. It's the financial system. It always is the financial system, and the financial system ultimately underwrites big pharma too. You can get into BlackRock, Vanguard, all those sorts of things. You start to figure, hey, Lone Wolf, thank you for that. I appreciate that compliment. God bless and keep coming. Glad you're here. Um, so what I was going to say is that we have one chance, in my opinion, to do this in a way that maybe doesn't lead to mass conflict between one another. And let me forthrightness requires me to tell you this. Every solution from here is bad. The government just basically tacitly declared war on somewhere, depending on what numbers you choose to believe, between, let's say, 15 million and 150 million Americans. And if those 15 million are determined to fight, we are now in a breakdown society. And why the government's trying to do that at a time, America would need extraordinary leadership to even try to survive this. We have excremental leadership, and balkanization is a likely outcome. But rather than rushing into a war in winter where it's going to be a disaster, where mainly what's going to happen are people just going to die for the lack of preparations, a second thought is the world appears ready to ditch the dollar. Saudi Arabia is already working with Russia, other countries. Iran now has a route to China. The idea the petrodollar is going to survive, and especially when the American military just went with its tail between its legs from Afghanistan, understand it wasn't the soldiers' fault, but you know what? You're stuck with bad generals. No one, if you have yourself a Custer, it doesn't matter if the Sioux were, shouldn't have won. They did. If I remember right, who fought in those battles, or if you want a different one, pick McClellan, another lousy general, or Montgomery, frankly, if you want my opinion. But and that's British, World War II. But what I was saying is that the dollar is what makes America America, and what makes America America now isn't something that's sustainable for any number of really obvious reasons that if you watch this channel, you probably already know. You wouldn't have found me if you didn't understand that. If you don't, go read any of the number books of the Federal Reserve, or, whatever you like. If gumption comes up enough to reject their debt ceiling, the federal government will lose the ability to project force on the people. That's a good thing. It's a good thing if you're left of center. It's a good thing if you're right of center. It's a good thing if you believe that sovereignty should be more local, that individuals should have freedom. If you believe in the Constitution, it would functionally bring back the 10th Amendment in a meaningful way. And it would prevent the worst impositions of what's happening. Would we suffer hyperinflation? Yes, almost immediately. But we're going to anyway. And at least at this point, sooner is better than later, because the slow death is the one we should fear, where people get taken to holding facilities. And, there are maps floating around with 10 of them. I know the closest one to my neck of the woods is in Newark, New Jersey. Maybe we'll turn the whole town into it. Feel bad for people who live down there. I got friends down that way, but it's a tough place to be. But something different is really needed in order for something new to happen. Because if we continue going down this path and we continue to allow this injection projection agenda, where you are being tracked and traced in every bit of your life and everything you're doing, it will come to conflict. And it will probably come to conflict in small sort of ways. So, and this is the problem too, that there's probably about a quarter to half of people who understand it, and a quarter to half people who either support what's happening and are totally checked out. The zombie thing of people going out there not knowing what's happening in the world is absolutely truth. I was in Civilization yesterday, and I'm not blaming necessarily the injections for this. I think that plays a part. It may or may not. But people are oblivious. Yesterday I was adding to our preparations. Let's say that, because I looked at the subtext of what was happening and made the logical conclusion, which, by the way, is anyone watching prices lately? I've seen prices on certain fixed goods jump anywhere from 5 to 30% in the course of just between August to September. And I don't think that's going to decelerate. I literally was at a Walmart and I was watching. They made the aisles bigger. There were fewer items, and they were changing things so that things were never close to each other the same way. Certain products and goods and brands were gone. And look, we're not in a time of complete austerity yet, but you could see the writing on the wall that there was going to be a problem coming down the line. And from all these shops I went to, and mind you, I live in a northeastern state. I'm in Maine. They see the masks. You see all the little bits and pieces, and people are just going forward with it because the compliance is being pushed through the private thing. And by the way, the whole thing of private versus public, this corporation versus government, the whole left-right paradigm that used to be, it's trash. If you let the corporations be the ones who will commit tyranny against you, they will do it just as gladly and just as happily, and maybe even more ruthlessly than the government, okay? It's all bad. So you need to start thinking a little bit differently. You need to think in terms of communities and networks and in terms of your actual values. It helps if you have a spiritual foundation. If your foundation's in Christ, you'll be able to see past these things a lot faster than if you try to argue ideology. The intention you're trying to accomplish is much more important than the systemic structure of how you set up your government or your economics or anything like that. But all of these things are being set up in conjunction to box people out with increasing speed, and what they're going to do is blame the austerity that creates in the system from people not being involved on those who are leaving the system but under false premises. For instance, they'll say, "Oh, there's a well, how would they put it? The media people will go out there and say, you know what, we are overloaded. Things are terrible with COVID. And what you might find is that, well, the problem is a staffing one because a whole bunch of people left, and a whole bunch of people left because they didn't want to comply with the mandates. And so they create a story and a narrative where they say, all these people are getting sick and we're at our capacity. Well, you've cut your capacity by 90% because of mandates that the very people closest to the system are increasingly choosing to contest. And I may get in trouble for saying that. And if I do, Telegram at Atlantic Homeland at Tom Kaczynski's me. You can find me. But I'm just saying things that are true, that are out there. I'm not, this isn't medical malpractice. This is just me telling you, things that people are talking about. You can believe it or you cannot believe it. And more on Telegram, I'll go into some of those stories and those testimonials. But what you see is a constructed narrative of, or like they've been linking the Taliban to white supremacy. What, because we both have beards? I don't know how you make sense of that. Because realistically, Islam is 100 miles away from it, but they don't like tradition because they want their new world order, like that Australian health minister was saying. So this is what they're going to push for, and they have demonstrated in country after country they are not going to stop unless they are resisted. And the only things you can do is you can fight them, or you can make the system ungovernable. And I would suggest and submit to you that the place to start is with making the system ungovernable. And really, the way you do that is pretty simple. You make yourself not a party to it. You begin building alternatives to it. It's no accident that same time you see that this week, the IRS was passing information saying that they want to track every transaction over $600, either a sale or a purchase. Why? Because they know a black market's going to come into existence when this economy is broken by the leadership on top, so that people through austerity will give power away. Revolutions in history happen for two reasons: because people are hungry and people are scared. Our people are being made to be hungry and scared. Our government is the responsible entity. You can look at the droughts in the West. You can look at the some of the farm policies, that they're being employed about the loss of crops. And that with the next lockdown, which looks like it's coming in October, we'll have that happen at the same time that they're going to say a new variant comes out. Flu season will be here, right? So that people are going to be getting sick either way. You're going to have that happen at the same exact time that you have, all these mandates coming due, where if you haven't done it, you will lose your job. And, they're not promising help for the poor sick people. They're saying they deserve it. We need to punish them. And so we who do not want this have to go ahead and start thinking quickly how that can be stopped. And that's why I mentioned the Fed limit. If the dollar breaks, then they can't do that to us anymore. And then we have to do something new. We need new money, and we're going to have to go through austerity. It'll be a national bankruptcy, and it will be hard. And at that point, you may see states separate, and you may see regions do things differently. And you may see people realize that Washington can't do this anymore, or different capitals, or maybe people come together for something different. I mean, it's not like we don't have assets, and those are options, but I don't know if it's going to be permitted, because I tell you the truth, I do think that there is a global effort behind this. I think the Chinese are the favored children of the globalists, and I think America is being set up for a full takedown. So I try to give you an optimistic view of how to do it, and I know that's not optimistic where I talk about massive austerity. In the other option, when they push just a little bit harder and say you can't buy, you can't sell, you can't get medical care, well, okay, you have turned your own most productive citizens into a group of brigands. So if they start to behave that way, you really can't be surprised. And this is why the most important thing you can do is find apolitical ways to begin organizing in your community, where you can gather with people, have sane conversations, and be able to take care for one another, understand vulnerabilities, not just at the individual level, but the community level. Do you get your own electricity in your community? Is your water supply local to you? And those conversations need to start happening. And I know this sounds crazy. And I know we trust our politicians. We're watching the governors fight against the other leaders. But remember, when people fought in historical wars like the Civil War, most people, 99% of people who were living, didn't have any government intervention in their life at any meaningful level. They were homesteaders. They were people who lived on farms. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have public sanitation. They didn't have services they relied upon to survive. Patches, good morning to you, brother. So this will be different because you have a lot more choke points. You are not prepared to just live on the farm and throw blankets and fire in the furnace, or I should say the fireplace, because you'd be going back and have the steam engine work for you if you even have that much. And that makes things different. So people have to be able to work somewhat collectively. Otherwise, the fall will be far worse. And what happens when that is mass death? And I think that's kind of what the system seems to be wanting to accomplish one way or another. And how do we get around that is a legitimate question. But realistically, the other question is, how do you survive it and what you want out of this? And I'll tell you, I mean, my strong position on it is you need to hold out. You need to stand strong. And you understand what I mean by that. And we will. I mean, I've done it. I've done it many times. And, we'll try to figure something out. And when it starts going, I mean, I don't know. I think things are going to get really local, really regional. I think far northern New England, doesn't necessarily see things the same way. But it's hard. This whole thing is it's person by person, community by community. And I guess one of the things that's going to determine this that we don't really know, but we all speculate about, is what will be the long-term impacts of people who are on these medical interventions. If we start seeing massive problems, there will be an opportunity for unity against the system. Conversely, if that doesn't happen soon, I think you're going to see more disunity. And there's a question that some people have asked is, how much can that kind of be, how should I, tuned, I guess would be a good way of putting it, how quickly and how fast it goes. And it's an interesting question. These are the pieces. And, this sort of thing has been set up in a very strange way with a sort of evil AI feeling component to it. So, all that being the case, I think it's highly likely that we have to consign ourselves to this idea that we're in a sort of a longish battle if we allow the system to continue moving forward. And like I said, you always have the right to comply or not comply with an order. And whatever's done to you, that's one thing. And going ahead and starting at that point so we can at least figure out who's on board is the necessary prerequisite to any other conversations that people should be having individually, in person, and never, 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 never online. Okay, and you understand what I mean by that too, I trust. So, in the interim, what do I expect? Could there be a false flag today? I worry about it a lot. I mean, 9/11, you would think. There's a lot of stories brimming in the alt news series about some surface to air missiles, that were taken. And I'll tell you something I've been thinking about. There was a lot of news about a week ago about 6 planes that, weren't allowed to leave Kabul. And I kind of wonder if we might have a new Iran type situation where they might say, okay, well, we're going to kill them on 9/11 to celebrate the anniversary, to try to change the narrative. Because when the narrative becomes too toxic, I mean, there's some people who argued at the time, I'm not saying it's true or not, but argued that the reason 9/11 was permitted to happen was it accomplished two things. Number one is it let the neocons go play in the sandbox. But number two was that after the 2000 election, America was almost as pissed off as it is now. All right, maybe not, but a lot more than it had been in a long time. And that giving a common enemy was a way to bring people together. Now, the government has tried to make an enemy of its own people, and they've done that because they're trying to comply with some global agenda that's being set by some time frame and some entity that obviously has greater say than the United States government. You would look at the financiers and their occultic links, and for me, look, I think we're going into the end times. I've said that biblically, and I've done show after show on that. So, Can't Buy It Sell, Mystery Babylon, go read the book of Revelation and see if you can't fit the pieces to, fit what you see in the day-to-day life. But yeah. Oh, well, and Adam's right. It was to get rid of stuff in the Pentagon too. The Office of Naval Intelligence, which is what was actually hit in the Pentagon, was doing research about. I think it was $6 trillion that went missing, and those were the people who ended up getting it. And you kind of wonder how that always works. You ask too many questions, you get into trouble. That's why I don't ask too many questions. I just make baseless speculations that have a weird way of becoming true over time. And y'all know you've been around a while. So those are some of the things that I am keeping an eye on as we go here through September. I think that what we should be doing is stocking up, really thinking about your preps, and building those community links and networks, and having meaningful conversations. And I'm going to say something you don't want to hear, but if someone's totally on the opposite side of this, even if they're family, wars like this, whether it goes hot or not, are always brother against brother wars. And it's going to be the same way this. Your family are, firstly, your family should be the believers in the Lord Jesus Christ. And if you haven't come to Jesus, you really need to do so. I mean, your soul is at risk, and your life isn't looking too long these days either. So you need to take it a little more seriously, even if you're young. And just take my word for it. Go read the Bible and ask the Holy Spirit to guide you. But once you know who your brothers and sisters are, you need people who have discernment, who understand the times they're living in. You need people who understand the challenges that are out there, who are not living in this mass delusion that it's all going to be okay if we just comply a little more. It doesn't work that way. It never will work that way. It can't work that way. Congratulations, Little Gaines. That is so great. God bless you, man. I wish I could be there. That's awesome. Congratulations for that. So that is what we need to do. And for the people who are in our lives, for the places we're working, for the places we live that we know are not going to work in the new world, this is your last opportunity. The world that was is gone. A new world that's coming into being that they want is there. And if you want to be part of the machine, okay, it's there for you. You can go for it. But if you don't want to be part of it, you can't have one foot in and one foot out. You need to be obedient. You need to head to the wilderness. And, that means different things for different people, right? I don't expect you to live in a tent in the woods, but it might mean taking a quiet job in a small town away from the main line. And it's a sacrifice, and you're going to have to give things up. But you know what? You can't keep investing into something that's only going to hurt you and then pretend to be surprised when something bad happens. There will be no political solution that will come from the leaders in this process, and it will not come from the governors either. I am glad governors are standing up against this tyranny. It's a good thing. However, they are not prepared for where this has to go, and ultimately their backsliding or their backyard actions, even if they're traditionally and legally correct, we have seen that governments across the world are using the emergency orders of health mandates to go ahead and to justify going past any reasonable defense of the laws of their respective nations, including our own. And I have no doubt that, as needed, the propaganda machine and some combination of big pharma will turn up the pressure on a number of people who go ahead and get sick, even if they take advantage of the very people who are most compliant with their orders. You see what I'm saying by that? All of that are things you should be expecting. And I will say something that's surprising to you. There may come a day where you need to have a mask and keep apart. Because just because what we've seen to this point hasn't been that bad doesn't mean something bad might not go out there. Don't assume that the people you're competing against are against using any tactic if it accomplishes their ends. They very much have worked hard to paint a propaganda picture where people who have chosen to, develop their natural immunity and consider other solutions are presented as pariahs who are causing this problem. If something worse gets out there, the hatred that they've already seeded will get a million times worse, and that you have to consider that as a viable outcome, considering the advancement of bioweapons technologies around the world, really, and what we've learned. Plus, when you look at the efforts, what was it? There was that big piece in the Intercept talking about gain of function research and just how much had been done. And we'll see. Paul's trying to go after Fauci for contempt of Congress. Nothing's going to happen to that man. He's been running this scam for 30 years. However, the fact is, you can draw the right conclusions if you watch this. Oh man, the sun's coming up here. Give me 1 second. Let me try to make that less bright for you. I'm not as angelic as it makes me look. Lord knows, I look like an old style prophet. I actually don't mind the look, but whatever. So those are things that you need to keep an eye on. What else to keep an eye on? Food supply, food cost, and hyperinflation. Hyperinflation's coming. If nothing else comes, hyperinflation will be the one thing that's inescapable, even if they can hold it together. Which means and they're fine with it because they want a new currency that's not dollar denominated, that is digital. And a lot of little pieces are indicating that you may not be able to buy directly in the future. I think the next move that they're going to make when this current effort fails is to say that people who receive money from the government must be compliant. And that's illegal according to the acts of Congress. But if they have a bad enough outbreak in October, I think the beat mob will be in support of it, which is why this isn't going away. This isn't going back to normal until everyone's on board with whatever this agenda is, and then you're in their hands, whatever that means. If it's because the people are going to get sick, if it's that there's technology being included in it, who knows? Not here to speculate about that because I'll get banned. I have some pretty well thought opinions on it based on some evidence that's coming out. There was a university in Spain who did some really good research. If you want to go look, and you can look at the properties of certain conductive metals that supposedly and things. But hey, what do I know, right? Um, I don't want to get banned again because I could. This is just an easy platform to use. It's one of the few I can use for my phone, and my computer's in the shop too. So if you were ever going to take mercy on me and send me an early Christmas present, now's not a bad time. Let me take a drink of coffee. You mind that? I mean, I'm talking a little bit today, but I haven't been on for a while. And by the way, if you have any questions, you want to throw them up. I'm not in a hurry to get back to the missus. She's probably not up yet anyway. We could talk about other things for a few minutes. If there's something you want to bring up. But I'm trying to cover what I think is most relevant. Not that there aren't other things, and not that there aren't black swans out there waiting to be clipped, because there always are. For those who aren't familiar with the term, a black swan is an event that happens that changes everything that you really couldn't have predicted, or at least it's assumed you couldn't have predicted. Maybe you could have, but I couldn't have. What else am I worried about going forward? I mean, the question I guess I'm asking myself is just how to organize. And, I was talking to one of our members, who was telling me the effectiveness of organizing through, neighborhoods, of schools, of churches, different ways. And in different areas, it's going to be different things. But you need that real life connection. And you need to recognize our infrastructure is a critical vulnerability. Most people in America could not make it 72 hours without basic utilities. People would go nuts, and especially if there was a communication breakdown, you would not be able to put it back together again. And that's the thing you have to remember. The health system is being broken. The law enforcement people have been leaving between what happened with BLM running them out of town and now what's happening with these mandates. They're going to be gone. There's not going to be anyone to help you. So you better be prepared to help yourself, Once that they say heaven helps those who help themselves. That's really true. And you need to be, spiritually prepared as well. I mean, we are dealing with people who are evil, who have no problem with setting people in factionalism against each other. And we haven't wanted to do that. You guys, a lot of you guys are dissidents. A lot of you guys knew me through CV Central. The dissidents for a long time have understood these problems exist. Have written eloquently about it and have watched and thought and had a lot of late night probing conversations about how far are we willing to go to fix things. And basically, people have kind of peered over the edge at that cliff and they've said, if we did this, so much would be lost that we're stuck, we're hostages in some ways. And now we're watching the people who are in charge of the system just chuck the whole thing over the edge and be like, really? You're that crazy? But you have to understand the deep sociopathy at the heart of our elite class. They don't see you as the same people as them. They see you as being downgraded to animals and us as, or them, I should say, as being upgraded to something higher. I mean, I've been in elite circles. I went to a high class university. I know how these people think. I don't agree with it. As a Christian, I find it anathema. It runs directly against everything Christ says. But I know how they think, and they think, well, look, and they would even say, I've had these conversations in my life before. These people do it to themselves. Why do you defend them? Why not just go ahead and take advantage? And you're still a person. You still have value. God doesn't make mistakes. There's no accident. And even the people who were mad at, even the people who, I was at a small business run by this little old lady, had to be at least 70 years old. And she can't sell her business. She wants to retire, but she can't afford to. So she's not. And she was scared of her own shadow with COVID. So I didn't make a stink about it. I was nice. And I talked to the person because I realized there was a person here. And I have to remind myself that the people who are going along and enabling this, yes, some are complete morons, but some are just people who are scared, who don't understand, who trusted the wrong person. And that happens. You'd be surprised how often that happens in rural areas because people here aren't close to the problems. They don't understand the deception because they haven't seen the civilization falling apart, which if you've lived in certain cities or in certain states, you know it in a way they can't. And so I get into this conversation and I'm just listening to her and she's trying to do the right thing. And this is the problem. The people in charge are telling us to do the right thing. but they're liars, they're evil, they're wicked, and they're setting people against one another by telling a lie at the heart of it. And so, what's the truth? Well, you need to be able to think, and say trust the science, but they don't allow you to go ahead and offer dissent. Science is a process, not a conclusion. And they say, oh, well, morality is relative. No, morality should be absolute, and science should be relative, right? Instead, we have science is absolute and morality is relative, and that's the fight we're against. That's the war in a simple sentence, that we are fighting to make morality something that's absolute so we can have a way to live with one another, and then use science within the construct of that, instead of saying that this idea we're going to make ourselves into something else, because that's the religion of the times. That's the religion of the elites. That's the transhumanism piece. And, that's why we're dealing with AI. And you look at all these components. I was listening to a story. They're putting like these Ray-Bans with like Facebook inline glasses. So it's not like you're not being tracked everywhere already. And you look at the bandwidth of the 5G systems and the 6G systems, and, augmented realities promised everywhere. Well, if you're living in augmented reality, what's really real? Are you living in Ready Player One? The Matrix has a new trailer. Resurrection's coming out. What world are you living in? And do you want to escape this world? And I guess that's where it comes to in the end. This is a spiritual message. In the end, it's a spiritual conflict, because do you choose to remain human? Do you choose to believe that the Lord created you in his own image and that you are following that, and that you want to be rescued and saved in that sense, and that you're going to depend on him? Because we don't have the ability to stop this on our own. I don't know how. I mean, maybe we can clog up the system and go back to a dark age and try again. That's the happy outcome. But that is what I'm seeing. And alternatively, you agree to be part of the machine, a node in the collective, a pod in the matrix. And these are the choices. And this is where the conflict is inevitably going to progress. And the more you allow biotechnology into your life, the more you will already be committed to that system. Because once you've made that choice, it will be very hard to leave it. Can people leave it? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've read, I spend time in the prophetic communities because I like to consider different perspectives. And for those who have taken steps down that road, you can repent, you can walk back, and you can ask for help. I mean, God is a God of miracles, This reality isn't what people think it is. We could walk that road. And that's kind of where it's going to end up, that some of us are going to choose to go ahead and accept we weren't an accident, and some of us are going to try to keep this dream going on forever. And you'll have to make your choice. And, we've reached a point where the battles aren't all about winning. We talk about survival. I want to do that for you so your families will be safe. But in the bigger sense, and for me especially, maybe it's a little different for Dana and I because we've been knee deep in the battle for years. It's not about living or dying. It's not about winning or losing. It's about being faithful and obedient. It's about understanding that there are things you are not to do. And to offend God by polluting the temple of our own bodies, by allowing his word, his code, to be rewritten into something that we created, bestowed, were endowed with, is an unpardonable thing, in my opinion. I know there are people who disagree with that. That's fine. And it's a path once people begin, they won't be able to come back from. It's not my job to say what judgment comes from that, but I will say this, that you will not be you anymore, and you may not know you're not you, because ultimately, you have a computer and you put an emulator in it, and it thinks instead of being a DOS-based machine, call them anymore, it'd be Apple-based. People might become the same way. If you can understand the programming of any system, you can change the way it thinks. And, we've had inputs that have been deceitful for a very long time. And some we recognize very clearly and some we don't. The bias we have that's most strongly and dangerous is that we cognitively are making decisions all the time. Truth is, you're usually making decisions on instincts and inputs, and cognition is a very small amount of what you actually do. And you have to understand that. You could increase it, and you have to look at things around you to do so. But the alternative is you're going to have a system where things get bad if you don't get involved, and then eventually they will get very good, theoretically, for those who choose to comply. That they will offer you something better once they get rid of some of the numbers one way or another. And it's going to happen, but whether it's inflation, whether it's war, whether it's pandemic. At this point, population is going down. pick your poison. All of them may happen at the same time. If you look at this as the biblical tribulation, you actually would believe that, and in fact, I do. I think war will come with the hyperinflation, and apparently, this is the interesting thing. China is a terrifying prospect as a militaristic nation, but apparently their second largest bank is overinvested in U.S. debt. So at the same time, our economy is being pulled down, theirs may as well. Their command and control systems may hold up. But in the same sort of sense, it's just one more provocation to lead to war. And a massive war kills a bunch of people, which allows the few people, all of them, hiding in New Zealand and other places like that, to take advantage of those opportunities. And this is how these people think. And they think generationally, they think in terms of the species, and they have advice you can look this up. You look at occultism, spirit cooking, all that crap. They channel occultism, and it tells them to do this because ultimately the end game, the conflict at the heart of this, is the effort to unmake man, and for Lucifer to prove that to God that man was a mistake and to desecrate him. Why you think you have to wear a face mask? Because you're in the image of God, so he didn't want to see that, and all the sort of things. So why they go so hard against Christians? Well, they'll bring in every religion you can support, but you support Christ. God knows. I mean, look how badly they treat him up in Canada, and that's coming here. It's coming to the United States. You can already see it. But other things, let's see other things, some quick hits before I go. Australia is now not selling you beer if you don't comply with the jabs during the lockdown. That's actually a thing. That's terrible, but true. Not that you should be drinking, your way through oblivion. Not that I've never done that before. Y'all have been around long enough. I can put down a fifth like nothing. But those are things. And we're going to see. They're just going to, the pain level's going to come up. So be prepared for that. And be prepared to live on less. And if you accept it, you can either approach it. The only thing you can do in life, I say this all the time, the only thing you can do in life is choose how you define things. Is this a test and a rite of purification to prove what you really believe? Or is this you having your world taken from you? Well, they're both the same thing, isn't it? So to my brothers and sisters listening here and anyone who tunes in, get right with the Lord Jesus Christ. Put your faith in God and allow him to lead you forward, and take it from someone I've been attacked by the media. I've had my job taken from me several times for things I believe. If you follow the Lord will look out for you. So let's say a quick prayer. Heavenly Father, we just pray on this day of recollection and grievance for the lives, grieving, I should say, grievance too, of the people who died 20 years ago in New York, in Washington, in Shanksville, that you not have their lives be lost in vain, that you give us the wisdom and discernment to see who our enemies really are, and to allow no more innocents to be harmed than must be the case. And we trust that you will look out for those, and we ask that you lead us out of this world with all these deceptions and delusions to a place of truth, and that your Holy Spirit guide us in today and on all things. So in Jesus' mighty name, I pray that. And I just want to congratulate everyone who's here. I know a number of you have come into the faith. And look, I wasn't there first either. There's no judgment. Forgiveness is something we all need. Repentance is a daily practice. We are all sinners. I am not better than you. You are not better than me. We are of one church, of one body. And let's try to keep each other safe. And I'm going to try to keep in front of it. And, behind the scenes, I'll tell you, I'm talking to people. I'm trying to do things, but you can't do anything until it gets worse. And the problem is what's likely to happen, just you got to keep an eye for, is tit for tat. One person gets real pissed off. They lose a job. They lose a business. Someone shoots someone. Someone shoots someone else. And I don't know. It's going to be a long, cold winter. Make sure you get extra heating supplies, and do it now. Your dollar's going to lose purchasing value quick. In October, it may lose it all, maybe even faster than that. Who knows? Because America's a paper tiger. But you know what? Don't love America. Your kingdom is not the red, white, and blue, but it's actually heaven above. And if you're fighting for that, then whatever we do here on this planet, and we keep that in our mind, we'll have a better outcome. God bless each and every one of you. A pleasure seeing you again. I will be around intermittently during the week. I am going to try to switch to the new format, hopefully by the end of the month. But I will try to be here and offer some little bits and pieces. Do join the Telegram group, t.me/Atlantic Homeland. I'm in there often, as much as I can manage it. And we'll be good. And just say a prayer for Dana and I. that things will come our way a little bit easier, not looking for money in that. Just that there are certain things we're trying to get taken care of before winter. Maine is not exactly a warm place, and we need a couple things to work out for us. So far, the Lord's done an amazing job taking care of us. I'm not ungrateful, and we've learned some lessons. But the time to experiment is not when it's snowing, and snow is coming. Winter's always coming. That's the way it is, and I wouldn't have it any other way. God bless. You guys have a good day.